Good afternoon.
Hello, welcome. Welcome to the Fall 2018 Doherty Scholars Luncheon. I'm Jody Eastberg, the director of the Center for Academic Excellence and also a professor of history here at Alverno. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all today.
I'm the Administrative Director of the Center for Academic Excellence. And on behalf of the Center, we just really want to extend our appreciation to all of you for joining us today and welcoming these new members of the Doherty Scholars Learning Community.
All right, it's an enthusiastic group today. Thank you. The Center supports Alverno's educational mission by providing students, faculty, and staff with transformational opportunities to build an intellectually curious community, engage in multidisciplinary thinking, and intentionally support and encourage academic challenge and achievement. The Doherty Scholars Learning Community, a signature offering of the Center, is named after Sister Austin Doherty. As a prime mover behind the creation of Alverno's abilities-based curriculum, Austin was the epitome of excellence. She was visionary, insightful, sharp, witty, and an international leader in higher education. Like you, our Doherty Scholars, she was pivotal in shaping the intellectual life of our campus community.
The Doherty Scholars Learning Community is really grounded in Sister Austin's belief in the potential of Alverno students to excel academically, especially through the tools that are provided by an abilities-based curriculum and through self-assessment. Through a process of faculty and staff nominations and student applications, you've been selected as participants in the Doherty Scholars, which is a group designed to assist you in connecting with one another and accessing opportunities that will help you to enhance and support the intellectual and scholarly life of our community.
Austin once wrote, "Students have to learn to act, despite their sense of being unready. That sense of unreadiness is dissolved only by acting or doing." By joining the Doherty Scholars, you've shown your readiness, your willingness to act as leaders of our intellectual community. So Laura and I just congratulate you on making this step, and I know your fellow Doherty Scholars welcome you, for those who are new, into the Doherty Scholars Learning Community. Congratulations. So now, I'd like to introduce two of our current Doherty Scholars, Dana Doyle, a Women and Gender Studies major with a psychology minor, and Ashili Carlos, an art therapy major with minors in psychology and Spanish and elective studies. Our students never make this easy. I always have at least 3 or 4 things to say. So Dana is a senior and has participated in the Doherty Scholars program since the fall of 2017. As a passionate advocate for feminism, she leads as co-president of Alverno's feminist student organization, the F Word, which has successfully connected students with educational seminars and raised money for Pearls for Teen Girls and AIDS Walk Wisconsin, in addition to receiving recognition as Outstanding Student Organization last year. Dana works in the Communication Resource Center. This is one of those times, let's count. Okay, Dana works in the Communications Resource Center, the Assessment and Outreach Center, the Academic Affairs Office, and will be interning with the Commons of Milwaukee through the Skills Accelerator program this year. Yeah, exactly. How do we fit it all in? And made it to this lunch. This past spring and summer, Dana was part of the Coastal Cities Baltic Sea class and traveled to Poland, Sweden, and Denmark. Her research interests include the portrayal of women and girls throughout history and its influence on women today, and she'll be graduating in December. I know, yeah. Ashili Carlos is also a senior and has been part of the Doherty Scholars since fall of 2016. Her passions include study abroad and assisting international students and individuals with English as a second language, which has led her to be a volunteer in the ESL classes provided at Journey House and as a conversation tutor here at Alverno. As well as being a mother and a full-time student, Ashili works in student affairs as a peer leader and in the International and Intercultural Center as a student worker. She's currently in her field study at Bridges of Milwaukee, where she creates creative arts plans for the elderly. This past summer, Ashili traveled abroad with nursing students to Japan, studied in Spain for a month, and this January will travel to Italy for 2 weeks. Ultimately, she hopes to combine her interests in therapy, ESL, and health to pursue a career with international impact. So it's my welcome to invite Ashili and Dana up. Wherever you are.
Welcome, fellow Doherty Scholars. The Doherty Scholars are a learning community dedicated to creating inspiration for and acting on academic excellence. We represent all four schools of college: adult learning and new initiatives, arts and sciences, professional studies, and the Joanne McGrath School of Nursing and Health Professions. In reading your applications, the committee learned much about you and evaluated your work based on 3 criteria: the potential for strong scholarly accomplishment and curiosity, an understanding of yourself as a learner, and the ability to take initiative in academic settings to collaborate with your peers. This year, there are almost 100 Doherty Scholars demonstrating and committed to these criteria. Imagine the impact we can make on campus to inspire achievement.
In their review of your applications, the committees found that you, like us, are academic leaders and demonstrate curiosity and accomplishment by double majoring, leading study groups, and leading and participating in academically focused student organizations. You pushed yourselves and your peers in your classes, and your faculty and staff recommendations noted that you were always asking to do more and finding ways to learn deeply.
The stories you've shared show that you take risk, you overcome significant challenges, and you give back to your community. You have goals to transform your academic success into social change, promising careers, advanced degrees, and meaningful futures for you and your communities. Most importantly, you are the type of people that ask in-depth questions. You search for the why and how. And as one applicant described, just the search, just the asking of questions, leads you to feel ecstatic.
By choosing to become a member of the Doherty Scholars, we are committing to participating in a learning community built by us. We serve as role models for what the joy of learning can look like. We will assist each other in finding opportunities to learn and grow. We will continue to challenge ourselves and to transform Alverno. Congratulations on this honor, and welcome.
Thank you, Ashili and Dana. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Vice President of Academic Affairs, Scott Zeman. Scott began his work at Alverno last November after 20 years of experience in higher education and also as a history professor. And he has taken the campus by storm with his I got to write this, just so you know. He didn't send it ahead, so he doesn't know it's coming. Yeah. He is taking the campus by storm with his affable demeanor and willingness to engage in complex and deep thinking, all characteristics of a history professor. It's a little joke. Scott's scholarly interests include atomic history and American pop culture. Before and while serving as an administrator, Scott taught a wide range of classes, including Atomic America, the cultural history of nuclear technology in the United States, media studies, crime fiction and film noir, the Cold War, science fiction film, and the history of evil. Zeman earned his PhD and his bachelor's degree from Arizona State University and his master's degree from the University of New Mexico. He's the author of multiple books, including Atomic Culture, How We Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, edited with Michael Admonson, and his third project, Magazines and the Bomb, Inside American Popular Periodicals and the Atomic Age is in Progress. Scott's going to draw from his scholarly interests today in his talk, Excellence and Electrons, Lessons from the Atomic Age. So please join me in welcoming Vice President Scott Zeman.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you for those very kind words of introduction. And I see you left the clock up here. I just told I need to be on schedule. I don't want to blow up your calendar. It's an honor to be here today to talk with you all a little bit about excellence and what that means. And I thought about this in terms of my own field, which is the history of nuclear technology. And what I wanted to do was to focus my comments in an area of excellence within the field I study, and that is nuclear physics. I am fascinated by the physicists who made the breakthrough discoveries in the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s that brought with it the good and the ill, of course, of the atomic age. And these individuals, you think of names like Enrico Fermi, Albert Einstein, Leo Szilard, Edward Teller. And I want to talk today about Lise Meitner. Is this a name, is this a face that's familiar to anyone here? To some of you? She's probably most well known for not receiving the Nobel Prize in 1944, when her collaborator Otto Hahn did receive the prize in chemistry for nuclear fission. And it has been discussed since then that really she should have been a co-recipient of that award. Let me tell you a little bit about Lise Meitner. She was born in Austria in the 1870s. She died in England in the 1960s. She had a long and illustrious career. There's an element named after her, meitnerium, which is element 109, for those of you who are interested. She was driven to excellence in her field, physics. At a time when women could not attend public institutions in Vienna, she had a private education that her parents supported in science and physics. She was the second woman to graduate with a doctorate in physics from the University of Vienna. She was the first woman full professor of physics in Germany. And her story is fascinating. It captures most of the developments in physics of that era, as well as the history that intervened in very tremendous and even catastrophic ways. I want to place her story at the center of what you could argue is the most challenging and major development in human history, and that is the discovery of nuclear fission and all that that meant. She studied with some of the major figures of the era, Max Planck, Leo Szilard, and others, Otto Hahn among them. In the 1930s, with the rise of fascism, she fled and went into exile in Sweden, along with many émigré scientists, where she continued her work, and she worked in physics for the rest of her life. She did, during this First World War, she served as a nurse before going back to her study of physics, and then went into the professoriate. Now, I'll get to that in just a moment. So, by the 1930s, the basic constituent elements of an atom had been discovered. That is a nucleus made up of neutrons and protons surrounded by electrons in orbit. And the discovery of the neutron was of particular significance. And in the hands of physicists, it allowed them to start to begin to probe the nuclei of atoms. And interesting things happen when a nucleus is bombarded by a neutron. Two things can happen. One is that it could split that nucleus into two other nuclei and release energy. The other is that it could be absorbed into the neutron of the target nucleus and be transmuted into something new. Let's go to Italy with Enrico Fermi, one of the most noted physicists of this era. He is working his way through the periodic chart of the elements, bombarding the nuclei of these various elements until he gets to uranium, which is the last of the naturally occurring elements on the periodic chart, element 92. He bombards it with a neutron, and he finds that it transmutes that it turns into a new, what he calls transuranic atom of a new element, mysterious element 93, this human-made element for the first time. This will become known as Neptunium. Eventually, the work will continue to the even more mysterious element 94, which we know, of course, is plutonium. So Enrico Fermi is working feverishly in his lab, and he's bombarding all of these nuclei, and he's finding out interesting things like in certain parts of the lab, he's having much more success rate than in other parts of the lab. And he starts moving around to different tables and so forth, and he finds that he's getting much better neutron capture on the wooden labs in his facility rather than the marble labs. And what he eventually incorrectly surmises is that the neutrons, as they're going to bombard their target nucleus, are being slowed down by the carbon atoms in the wood that makes up the bench. And so he tries different carbon-based elements as so-called moderators, including a poor goldfish in a bowl. I think about that. At this point, we get to Lisa Meitner's major and signal contribution to the development of nuclear physics, and specifically to fission, that is the splitting of those nuclei. As they are working on uranium as well and bombarding it, they posit what is called the liquid drop model of the nucleus. And basically, their theory is that when hit by a neutron, it starts an oscillation within the nucleus that starts to wobble and then pull apart two nuclei. Okay, why is this significant? Well, in addition to furthering our understanding of what's going on when a nucleus is bombarded, they find very significant aspects of this discovery. I want to read to you just a little bit from Richard Rhodes' book, The Making of the Atomic Bomb, which is an excellent source on this. So Lisa Meitner and her colleague Otto Frisch are working the calculations on this liquid drop model. And I always have to apologize to the scientists in the room. I'm a simple historian, so don't judge me too harshly, right? And thinking about what's going on here, Lisa Meitner is reminded at a certain point of a lecture that she attended. And I'll read to you from Richard Rhodes. Eventually, the waste would give way of the nuclei. Two smaller nuclei would appear where one large nucleus had been before, barium and krypton, for example. Then, Frisch recalls, Lisa Meitner was saying that if you really do form two such fragments, they would be pushed apart with great energy. They would be pushed apart by the mutual repulsion of their gathered protons at 1/30th the speed of light. Meitner calculated that energy to be about 200 million electron volts. An electron volt is the energy necessary to accelerate an electron through the potential difference of 1 volt. 200 million electron volts is not a large amount of energy, but it is an extremely large amount of energy for one atom. The most energetic chemical reactions release about 5 electron volts per atom. Ernest Lawrence that year was building a 200-ton magnet cyclotron that he hoped could generate as much as 25 million electron volts. Frisch would calculate later that the energy from each bursting uranium nucleus would be sufficient to make a visible grain of sand jump visibly. In each mere gram of uranium, there are about 2.5 times 10 to the 21 atoms. Think about that number for a second. An absurdly large number, 25 followed by 20 zeros. They asked themselves, what could be the source of all that energy? That was the crux of the problem and the reason no one had credited the possibility before. When she was 31 in 1909, Meitner had met Albert Einstein for the first time at a scientific conference at Salzburg. The development of our views regarding the nature of radiation being discussed. At that time, I certainly did not yet realize the full implications of his theory of relativity. She listened eagerly. In the course of the lecture, Einstein used the theory of relativity to derive his equation of E equals mc squared, with which Meitner was then unfamiliar. Einstein showed thereby how to calculate the conversion of mass into energy. These two facts, Meitner reminisced in 1964, were so overwhelmingly new and surprising that to this day I remember the lecture very well. She remembered it in 1938. Right? This is on the eve of her exile, on the day before Christmas. She also had the packing fractions in her head, says Frisch. She had memorized Francis Aston's numbers for mass defects of nuclei. Okay, here you go. If the large uranium nucleus split into two smaller nuclei, the smaller nuclei would weigh less in total than their common parent. How much less? That was a calculation she could easily work. About 1/5 the mass of a proton less. Process 1/5 of the mass of a proton through E equals mc squared. 1/5 of a proton mass, Frisch exclaims, was just the equivalent to 200 million electron volts. So here was the source of all that energy. Nuclear fission had been discovered and had been achieved. So at this point, Europe is descending into war. And in Germany, and in the United States, and in England, there is an effort to harness this new energy, this fission, for the purposes of making a weapon of mass destruction, of making an atomic bomb. In the United States, actually, Albert Einstein pens a famous letter to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, telling him that Germany is pursuing this and the United States should begin. The Manhattan Project is initiated in the United States to build the world's first atomic bomb. There's work going on in England. And as we know, horribly, in 1945, the world's first atomic bomb was first tested and then used by the United States against Japan and Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Right? So nuclear fission had been harnessed for a massive weapon. It also would be harnessed for the production of energy. This is the basics of nuclear power and how it functions. We won't get into fusion, that's a different and later development. But in this story, and I want to add this in terms of Lisa Meitner's position on the development of a nuclear weapon. Now, Robert Oppenheimer, who had headed the Manhattan Project and oversaw the construction of the world's first atomic bomb, would later come to say that the physicists have known sin. During the Manhattan Project, as some of the colleagues of Meitner are working at Los Alamos and in England to develop this bomb, she is invited to take part in the project, and she wrote back simply, "I will not help make a bomb." That was her position. It was about the basic nuclear physics research, and she would not be part of that. In fact, she later chastised her colleagues who had stayed in Germany, who had worked on the program, and who, in her opinion, had not done enough to stop the war or to stop the carnage of the millions of people killed in the Holocaust and in what happened in the war in Germany. So, Lisa Meitner, pursuing her entire career in excellence in understanding the atom and understanding the nucleus, who pushed herself against the odds as a young person to become highly educated to become one of the foremost physicists in the world at the time, and Lisa Meitner, who, like some and unlike others, made a decision that her work would not be, at least she would not be directly complicit in the work to make a weapon of mass destruction. I have a final quote here I want to leave you with from Lisa Meitner. Science makes people reach selflessly for truth and objectivity. It teaches people to accept reality with wonder and admiration, not to mention the deep awe and joy that the natural order of things brings to the true scientist. And I think her life and her work embodied those ideas. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott. We really appreciate your time today. And now I'd like to introduce one of our colleagues, Associate Professor of Religious Studies, Stephen Dunn, who is going to lead an invocation for us. As many of you have experienced, Stephen has been very involved in our Center for Academic Excellence as an instructor for a foundational course in our program that I know several of you are enrolled in, which is the Humanities 150, Spirituality and Society. And we really appreciate Stephen's support of the center.
I want that quote. I got to use that. As Dean and Vice President, Sister Austin Doherty opened each academic year's community meeting for faculty and staff with an invocation. And here's one of her favorites. Let us take a moment to ask for God's blessing on us and on our work, and especially our responsibility for the future. Teach us, O God, to use all the circumstances of our lives, today and each day, for this is the essence of leadership and responsibility. Teach us to use our differences to learn how to grow. Teach us to use our disappointment to learn how to endure. Teach us to use our success to learn how to be thankful. Teach us to use our failures to learn how to be creative. Teach us to use responsibility to learn how to listen. Teach us to use our confusion to learn how to laugh.
Thank you all. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Scott. And thank you all for being here today. We look forward to seeing the spirit of Austin Doherty continue to grow and flourish in each of you as you bring the presence of curiosity into all that you do. So thank you all for being here. I have a few final announcements. I know some of you are trying to dash to class, so leave when you need to. And those of you who don't have class, you're welcome to stay and have some more lunch. The first announcement is, I'm Laura Sear. I'm the one who sends you all those emails. Check your spam. Check it regularly. I really do send you a lot of emails. I try to make sure that they're important ones. You'll be getting one probably from me around the beginning of every week, reminding you of events and activities that are coming up that week. If you have any questions, you can always email me, call me, stop in. The Center for Academic Excellence is located physically in FO 138. If you have never been there, stop by sometime. It's an amazing space, and it's there for all of you to use whenever you need to. As Doherty Scholars, you have access, key card access, early in the morning through late at night, till midnight. So even if I'm not there and I've locked the door, you can still get in. It's a great place to study. It's a great place to maybe have one of your group meetings or work on a project. There's a big white wall where you can make all sorts of notes and plans and things like that. We just, of course, ask that you clean. This is a space for everybody to use. But we really encourage you to use it. And let me know if you actually want to reserve it as a group for an activity or a planned project or something like that. We really want you to do that. Finally, this is your learning community, and we really want you to make it what you want it to be. So while we'll be providing activities and things for you to choose from to attend, make it what you would like it to be. If you want to meet up with Doherty Scholars at some of these activities that are open to the public, please do. If you want to suggest an activity, go for it. If you want to, suggest a learning opportunity that may take something a little bit farther, and you think some others might be interested in that too, let us know. We'll put the word out. We really want this to be your learning community. We look forward to learning with you. So now, have a great rest of the day at class. Enjoy some more food. Make sure you eat all those delicious treats, and thank you all for coming.